Hello, my name is Bill Haley, and this is for Haley 2024, The Movement's Government Reform Ideas. Now, this video is going to be on private law enforcement and creating greater respect for cops than the current system. So what I'm doing here is proposing a new constitution for the United States. It replaces every state constitution and actually makes local constitutions as well. So it's a full revamp of the government, radically changing the foundations of government to more liberty, more freedom, and to go to a competitive governance system of governance. So let's go through the full Constitution real quick, so you understand you have a background or understanding of what the system is. So when I go through the clauses relating to cops and law enforcement, you'll understand what we're talking about. So first thing you have to understand is that we're going to separate all government power into 30 sectors with top elected and selected leaders per sector. So if a person's in charge of, let's say, family law, they're not in charge of commander-in-chief dealing with the military. If you're in charge of the diplomats, you're not in charge of education. If you're in charge of the environment, you're also not in charge of land and water, or roads has a different one. So all these things have different legislative branches, executive branches, judicial branches. So it's important to understand that we totally separate it. No person with official authority, with governmental power, is in more than one sector at a time. So if you want to belong to police, you cannot also belong to banking regulations or food regulations and the like. So let's continue going. And we'll go over all 30 of those in a second. Violent crime mitigation is the 5 that we are going to be talking about today on this video. And this is the 5 on there. Violent crime, defining violent crime, the law enforcement itself, law enforcement authorization, which is a representative body that authorizes anybody to have inherent government power, which means they have to see that you have education, you have oversight over you and the like. And they give additional oversight over you. Judicial authority, that's a court system. And the prison and correction, that's another system. Now these are all going into the free enterprise system or competitive governance, and we'll discuss that in half a minute. Here it is. Within each sector, and we still have three levels of government, federal, state, and local, but within each sector, there's roughly 12 different competitive governing agencies. All you need is 5% of the population to agree with you, then you get to be governed by the the CRA, the competitive governance that you want to be governed with. So it's highly important. You can't be above 20%, or you just split and become 2 of similar-minded regulations. But as long as you get 5%, you can become a government unto yourselves with that 5% membership. As long as you're not creating negative externalities to other people outside of your group, outside of your transactions and the like, you get to govern yourselves within your CRA, within your sector. So these are full governmental systems with executive, legislative, and judicial. So it's highly important to understand the whole setup there. On the other side over here, you'll see the rating system, and that's going to give a lot of high quality information from a wide variety of perspectives. And that's also going to put rating floors that will limit low standards that will create negative externalities or significant negative externalities. It's highly important to understand each word, what each system does. This whole Constitution is made to make the CRAs, the competitive governance, work better. 90% of this whole Constitution is competitive regulatory agencies, and everything else, the sector boards, the parent sector boards, the rating agencies, and the like, they're all there to support the CRAs, because a few things need to go monopolized. You're always going to have naysayers saying you can't do that because certain things need to be monopolized. Well, that's within the system. Let's go on. In the Constitution, I have a really nice preamble, describes and gives a direction for the Constitution. Then we have a citizenship section, a general laws. Bylaws is internal governance of your governmental organizations. Federal, state, and local, how that's dealt with. Original authority, what level of government, what level of the CRA structure has top level authority, and just a teaching on how you can have laws in the first place. Where does the law start from? Supermajority if it's monopolized governance, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you have to have a 70% vote to have monopolized governance. So it's not going to happen often. That's going to keep a lot of things at the CRA competitive governance level. Parent sector board, how that's structured. CRA sector board, how that's structured, and what the purposes are for those. Sector boards are over top of their one sector, and they have this. They're made up of their CRAs or representatives of their CRAs. So that's highly important, and that will be the monopolized sector. Again, the CRAs are 90% of this, and everything else is to support this. Okay, the rating system is also to support that and to also limit negative externalities. It's going to keep a lot of things from going to the monopolized governance because it will put a rating floor when there's significant negative externalities. So there's a lot of different ways to achieve eliminating negative externalities. So the rating floor allows a lot of different methods to be tried. It takes a monopolized system away. It allows more to be done at the competitive governance agencies. Taxation, everything still needs to be paid for. Most of the fees are going to be fees from the competitive regulatory agency that you select. You have to select one per sector, per level of government. So you have a lot of selection to do. Then within the CRAs, then you elect your leaders, elect your representatives. How we deal with that going from the old system to the current system to the new system. Pockets of freedom is immigration, foreign policy. There's videos out on that. You can read up on that. States partial acceptance per sector is to help get this thing passed with only going partially there. But we want the whole system going in this direction, at least I do. The separation of responsibilities and authorities into 30 sectors. Again, these are top level elected leaders. Nobody's in charge of more than one sector at a time. So if you're legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branch, you belong to one sector, never more than one. So it's important to know that you don't have a president over all of them. These are not secretaries of defense and education and secretaries of the environment and secretaries of the interior, all those things. Top level executive leader, you have, like, let's say 30 governors, 30 presidents, 30 mayors, 30 state legislative branches. Each one, they're not multiplying government power, we're dividing government power into the 30 sectors. But then we're even dividing it more where everybody's competitive governance, where you select the governance that you want in that one sector. You might be more conservative in education, more liberal when it comes to environment, more libertarian when it comes to roads. There's a lot of different ways to be. A lot of political philosophies. You pick per sector and per level of government. Here's a 5 in the charity system because we get rid of all government welfare. We go to a charity system. Here's 5 in the foreign protection system. Again, the top diplomat is different than the top commander-in-chief. And it's different from the top authorization agency. We have a funding mechanism. And the military goes significantly to the free enterprise system. Not all the way, but significantly to the free enterprise system. I'm sorry. Okay. Violent crime mitigation system, that's what we're going to deal with today. But this is going to give you a review. I'll review all these in a second. Here's 5 more sectors dealing with healthcare, finance, insurance, food, education, manufacturing, human resources, and sales. Identity sector is going to be highly important within this, within what we're talking about here, because that deals with citizenship, ownership. It will hold all your education records, all your finance records, all your criminal records, and the like. Your identity sector is going to be key into some of this, so we'll touch on that. Environmental, work safety and disability, transportation, media and communication, land and water. All those sectors are separated out. So when you elect or select and then elect, you are concentrating your vote on that one sector, on that one level of government and the like. Competitive regulatory agencies, so important to understand, these are full governmental systems, executive, legislative, and judicial powers, each one. So there's a lot of them. regulates, governs, and sends representation up to the monopolized sector board level. That's so important. City, state, and federal, but all three has all 30 sectors. Obviously, some on the federal sector is going to take care of more of the military and the like. Land and water, we're trying to keep a lot of that down to the local level. A lot of things are going to be at the state level. We'll just have to see which way each sector goes. I have which one has original authority, the top level authority within my constitution. The military is mostly dealing with foreign policy, and the military is dealing with federal. Everything else is state or some local. So cops are going to be a lot of local, some state, a little bit of federal. So let's continue going. Here's the system again. Hopefully from what I just talked to you about and explained some things, you understand this a little bit better. Private law enforcement creating a greater respect for cops. Right now there's a lot of animosity between the people and the cops for a lot of different reasons. Some legit, some not legit. Some misinformation, some correct information. A lot of thought patterns out there of how things are going. But the fact is, if you allow each individual, each business to hire their own police officers, they're there to protect them. Now, obviously, if you go harm somebody else, they get to be protected by their police officers. And it's not the police officers necessarily that you hired, because they hired them to protect them. So if you go harm somebody, you still get arrested by their police officers. Now, before we go any further, all police officers have to protect everybody within immediate danger. Then afterwards, after the immediate danger ends, your private law enforcement comes in, investigates the crime, and goes through the system. There's a full system, everything's accounted for, a ton of accountability. So let's go through it. Violent crime mitigation system. I purposely did not touch on it a minute ago, but let's really go through this. Defining the violent crime and prosecuting violent crimes is Sector 11. They define it. That has to be monopolized on the definition of violent crime. Education crime, insurance crime, finance crime, healthcare crime, all those breaking of those laws are dealt with within their sectors. Violent crime is harming somebody else physically, or a credible threat, or the like. So that's defined as a violent crime. Law enforcement is the actual people with the guns going out there making the arrest and the like. So sheriffs, police chiefs, police sheriffs, and all that. And everybody, if you want to have a badge to have governmental authority, you have to be authorized by the law enforcement authorization. So nobody can just go and say, I'm starting my police business. You have to get authorized to have a police business. You have to be authorized to be a police officer, a sheriff, anybody that holds a gun. Obviously, people can hold guns. We have very strong Second Amendment policies within this new Constitution. So everybody has the right to hold a gun, but to have governmental power of a police officer, to say that you have a badge to be able to make an arrest, other than a simple citizen arrest, there will be guidelines and stuff. But to have a badge where you can go in and show a badge, say I'm a police officer, those people have to be approved by 70% of the people. Better said, representatives of 70% of the people in your locality, in your state, in the federal government. So it's highly important to understand you're not going to be able to get people outside the norms. You're not going to get corrupt people, because this law enforcement authorization agency is going to be able to weed out anybody that are thugs, that are not respecting civil liberties, that are flat out racist. They're going to be able to get rid of those people with a 30% vote. Well, actually, if it takes a 70% vote to authorize it, and then if you find out they're bad, it takes a 40% vote to get rid of them. Now, hopefully, if they have bad ratings, people aren't going to hire them, because somebody has to actually hire somebody to be a police officer, to pay for it, because we're not using government money anymore. Everybody has to have a law enforcement contract, which means you select what police business you want to hire. So let's go through it, because I'm going ahead of myself. but you'll see some of the clauses within this a little bit. But it's so important to understand every person, every business selects which police business they want to hire. They're going to have really good information from the rating system. Advertisements and the like are going to show what police business is doing the best. And nobody's going to be allowed to violate civil liberties much because they're going to lose their authorization. There's a lot of ways to hold somebody accountable. You're going to have a rating agency and a CRA that you can go to at all times to represent you and have real governmental power to say, this person, this police officer violated civil liberties. He was a thug. He was threatening. He did whatever. Now, there has to be some proof, but it has to go through a process. But you're going to have advocates that you hire as a rating agency within law enforcement, and also through your CRA to really make sure you are protected and the bad people, the bad cops are taken care of. So let's continue going through this. The judicial authority is the court system. The court system is going to have a lot of power. Again, a lot into the free enterprise system, but with some standards. They cannot violate civil liberties. We have a full civil liberties system that I'm going to do on another video, but this video will touch on it as well. But I really want to go through it with another video, so I can really concentrate on the civil liberties aspects, making sure you're securing your papers. Second Amendment is protected. Your the Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment, the First Amendment, right of associations. All these things have to be respected. The prison and correction system, again, free enterprise, a lot better system, a lot more accountable system. It uses a roll of prices. It uses free enterprise for the best parts, and it has a lot more accountability than the current system. The current system is not the best on accountability. A lot of people think that free enterprise prisons are a bad thing because they're just in there for the profits. Well, it's not set up the best right now. Either the government run or the private run prisons are not the best. I have another way of doing it that hopefully will get you a lot better results. So I'm going to talk with regular words on a few slides here, and then I'm going to go with some actual clauses. So everyone hires their own police. Highly important to understand. You're not paying taxes, so the government pays for it. You are paying for a police contract. So there'll be about a dozen different police companies out there. I say a dozen for a lot of different reasons. It doesn't have to be exactly a dozen, but roughly a dozen police companies out there for the state level, for the local level, for the federal level. You select the one that you think is doing the best job. Now, if you want to pay the least amount, you're not going to get the best detective work. You're not going to get the best crime lab. You're not going to get the best results from the manpower and the like. You pick the one that you agree with the most. Highly important. Clauses within the Constitution that will bear this out. Other people pick the police that they want. Police have to protect everybody with immediate danger, but then after the immediate danger is over with, your private police company comes in and does the regular behind-the-scenes police work. So there's a lot of accountability for this. And we'll touch on how the cooperation, how we get joint patrols and the like. Higher level police organizations like the FBI, State Bureau of Investigations, we're going to have those type of police officers, those type of organizations. Those functions are covered within this. Every person has many CRAs and many rating agencies working on their behalf. So I said a minute ago, the rating agency that you pick, they're going to have real power with the rating floors and rating and giving information to people. They're going to be able to investigate significantly. They're going to have the right to go in and look at police records. They're going to be significantly looking through all the internal affairs information. They're going to have access to all the body cameras. They're going to have access to a lot of different things. You can go to yours, give your complaint, give your feedback on what happened, your story about what happened, Now, if they find that you're lying, that there's fraud and abuse and rules that you can get in trouble for lying to the police, lying to the rating agencies, and lying to the place because you're slandering a cop if you were lying about a cop. So that needs to be part of it because we need good information. So we have a lot of accountability even for the common man, common citizen, if they're lying about a police officer. So there's a lot of important things going on. Okay, a defendant, this is an actual clause. A defendant's judicial authority CRA must supply a lawyer to the defendant in a violent crime cases. So the defendant's judicial authority CRA must supply a lawyer. So if you were arrested, that person who got arrested, their CRA from the judicial branch, judicial sector, their CRA, you had to join one. So it's all known ahead of time. So if you get arrested and you're going through the process, your CRA from the judicial branch has to supply you with a lawyer. Now you can hire your own, whatever your agreement is with that CRA, but you have to have a lawyer, and they'll provide you with the public defendant-like person if whatever the agreement you have with them. You can either hire your own or you get their public defender. Be wise on selecting what CRA you want. Okay, let's see. Sector 25. Okay. Police records are not going to be held by police anymore. Your criminal records are not going to be held by the police. Maybe they'll have some framework. Maybe they'll have a little bit of information. But the bulk of the information is going to be held by your identity CRA. Identity sector is going to deal with ownership, citizenship, police records, education records, medical records, a lot of things that the identity sector is going to take control over, that our current government is in charge of right now. I know they might not be in charge of financial records and medical records, but by the amount of regulations they have, the government has tremendous control over your medical records, your financial records, because they regulate it so heavily. So they have a lot of control over that, whether they work through a private sector businesses or not, because of the level of regulations. It is basically fascism, not in the horrible sense of fascism. It is government being in charge through private sector regulations is kind of the definition of fascism, which can be bad, don't get me wrong, but fascism is not always the horrible thing that Nazis did. It has a definition. Okay, let's go through this. So, Sector 25, which is the Identity CRA, must have a continuously open and rapidly accessible system for authorized law enforcement personnel to gain criminal record information regarding the CRA members' law enforcement encounters. So a police officer has the ability to go into his computer to look up a person, and that Identity CRA will protect that perpetrator's, the defendant, perpetrator, whatever you want, the person the police officer is investigating. That CRA is going to protect that person's information. But that police officer, there'll be thresholds. If they saw them weaving on the road and driving recklessly, that's a threshold. If the police officer saw them or there's an eyewitness of somebody doing a crime, that's a threshold. They have to meet thresholds. And then the CRA has to give over information. Obviously, the police officers will have guidelines on when they can actually make an arrest, when they can't make an arrest, what information they're allowed to look at, what information they're not allowed to look at. All that's worked out ahead of time, and when thresholds are met, they have that record. Those records are available to that police officer to do their job. So, law enforcement must log all encounters that reach rating floor established thresholds in Sector 25 in this Sector 25 system within 24 hours. So, anytime a police officer looks something up, it's known. A person's CRA knows about it, so they can inform the person that they were being investigated, unless it meets a threshold of keeping something secret, which hopefully that doesn't happen often, but I can understand some of the rationale. But if that rationale holds up, the thresholds are met, then the information is available to the police officer, or the information is available to the citizen that was being investigated. Every person with inherent government authority within the violent crime mitigation system must gain authority from the LEA, Law Enforcement Authorization, Sector Board, and pledge allegiance to the LEA leadership. So if you're a cop, you have inherent government authority. And you have levels of authority, from the first day on the job rookie police officer to the regular police officer once you get out of your rookie status, to a detective, to a master detective, whatever level you want to go to. There are probably about 10 different levels, going from a FBI type level all the way down to a mall cop, which is a very, very lowest level. Or the common person will have a level as well, depending on how much training. And there'll be training that a common man can have to have a tad bit of authority. Not as much as making a major arrest or anything like that, but to be a police assistant or something. You follow certain thresholds, you get certified, and it's never enough to be a regular police officer to be, assistant or whatever. So there'll be many levels, is what I'm trying to say. Every sector board must develop, and that's all within the Constitution. It might not get it right here, show it right here, but it's within the system. The sector board must develop a process regarding arrest through the end of trial that respects civil liberties within this amendment, or properly pass civil liberty rating floors. So there has to be a process. Because we're going free enterprise police, free enterprise court system, free enterprise a lot, we need some societal oversight. So the sector board is a monopolized societal oversight. So every sector board must develop a process regarding, and every sector board means all 30 sectors: environmental, education, finance, everything. Now I know I've been talking mostly violent crime now, but every sector will have their develop a process. So obviously financial crimes are different than a rape or a murder. So they'll have different processes. Education crimes are a lot different. That's not nearly as severe or pertinent to immediate action. Anyway, through the end of trial that respects civil liberties. So there's a lot of ways I'm going to have civil liberties, and I'll have a full video just on civil liberties for this Constitution. Within this amendment, or properly pass civil liberty rating floors. So we use rating floors as civil liberty protections, and we'll discuss how that works. A rating floor is a rating level set by the rating system. A CRA must not drop below. So it's highly important that CRAs can have whatever regulations they want, except for when the standards go so low that doing business significantly harms other people outside the transaction, or generally the society at large. So there's a lot of things in that realm. So we don't want rating floor. That's what a rating floor can do: stop significant negative externalities. That's what laws are supposed to do in the first place, is be only stop significant negative externalities. So we have rating floors that allow different regulations to be in effect, each one trying to stop negative externalities in different ways. So it creates this, the free enterprise system is best when it is competing on which one's going to have the best standards, the best products, and the like. And regulations are a product. It is a service by CRAs to, it's a product / service, and competition gives the best results. When you have competition for cars or music or TV shows or clothing, it's best to have competition and not monopolize. So regulations, we're going to do the same thing. Regulations need competition as well. So there's a lot of ways to stop pollution from happening. We don't want a regulation that's monopolized, that stops and puts everybody into a business model, of one narrow business model, where another business model might be able to be very successful. A rating floor may not be regulatory in nature, so it's important to understand what a rating floor is and what it's not. Rating floors should always allow multiple methods of regulations to achieve the goals of reducing negative externalities. And this is going to apply to the police officers so much to stop civil liberties, what the processes are for arrest, how they deal with the citizens. There's a lot of ways to do it, but you can't do it in such a way that you're thugs, the police officers are thugs or whatever. You can't go in there with such a heavy hand that you're just injuring people, beating people up. Don't get There's a lot there, but it's not going to allow a police officer to go outside some of the norms. But it's going to give it enough free enterprise to allow experimentations, as long as they're not doing things in a very bad way. The rating system must set a rating floor for regulations dealing with negative externalities. So this is a must, and I use the word must, and they kind of have to. So if somebody says, hey, this is a significant negative externality, they go to the court and say, yeah, the rating floors need to address this. You are harming people. This factory is polluting something a lot, and it's creating a significant negative externality, and the court can say, yes, you need to put a rating floor, so you can figure out how you're going to solve that pollution problem, but you have to solve the pollution problem. Negative externalities in this amendment is defined as directly harming entities without their agreement. It's a big area of discussion about what a negative externality is and what directly harming an entity without their agreement is. So we're going to have a video just on that. A 50% rating system vote establishes or increases a rating floor, because we don't want, even though this is at the sector board level, on the rating system, it's called a rating, on the rating system side, it's called a rating system. That's a sector board level, that's a monopolized level. It's at 50% because you are actually harming other people. This is not an agreement. You don't need the 70% because you are actually harming other people, so it's down to a 50% to stop you from harming. But the judicial branch has to state that it is a negative externality worthy of going past a significant label. And we're going to use rating floors and the like to measure that. So we have representative bodies, not just the judicial branch, but representative bodies. And the judicial branch is to some degree a representative body as well. But we have specific representatives of the people, those organizations making some of these decisions are when it's significant, when it's not. So it's not something frivolous. We don't want somebody saying you can't have a certain flower in your backyard because it smells and we don't like it. Well, that's a low level negative externality. We want significant negative externality, like you can't park a broken down trailer in your backyard and have a store in the middle of a residential area. I mean, those type of big significant negative externalities. A civil liberty rating floor is defined in this amendment as limitations of sector board actions that infringe civil liberties. Sector board actions, laws, regulations, and attempting to solve negative externalities and societal negative externalities must respect other civil liberties with strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny is a legal term for you have to limit how you're going to deal with a negative externality in such a manner that you're not harming another civil liberty. There's a lot of examples for that, but you're trying to solve the problem of healthcare, so you're trying to solve a civil liberty issue with that, trying to get people health care, but you can't do that by forcing somebody to do it in a way that messes with their religious liberty. You can do it in a different way, and this whole system kind of solves that problem by having some people have their health care regulations over here, and they select which healthcare CRA they want to go with, and other people select another way. And if somebody doesn't want a certain type of contraceptive or whatever, they don't have to, but they join that set of regulations. And we don't have just employers being in charge of civil liberties for their employees anymore. There's a lot to get into. And this is one that we're getting off track on that one. That's a rabbit hole. Now deal with more with that on the civil liberties one. Okay, let me see if yep, I got that one. Civil liberty violations in this amendment regard actions by rating systems or sector boards. This is not at the CRA level. These are at the sector board, monopolized sector board level. Restricting citizens, organizations, businesses from engaging in activity cited as civil liberties. So CRAs can, because you selected that. If you don't want to be limited on First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Third Amendment, Third Amendment's not really relevant here, Fourth Amendment and the like. If you don't want to be limited on that because of a CRA regulations, well, join a different CRA. But sector board cannot restrict citizens and organizations and businesses from engaging in activities cited as civil liberties. And civil liberties are also protections in the violent crime mitigation system. So that one's more relevant for what we're talking about right now. Civil liberties in the criminal justice system, or violent crime mitigation system is how I put it here. Civil liberties in this amendment are not obligations at the sector board or rating system level to provide funds, products, or services to people. So I don't want anybody to think that civil liberties, and I make it very clear in my Constitution, is not there to provide food, health care, education. People call the right to health care or right to education as a civil liberty. In my Constitution, I clearly say, regardless of how you want to use words and definitions of words, that's not the definition here. I want to make sure people use the correct definition for civil liberties, or at least I define civil liberties. If they want to use it elsewhere, let them use it elsewhere, but I define it as not including providing for healthcare, providing for education, providing for other issues such as food or housing or whatever. If you want to call it civil liberties, you can, but I define civil liberties within my Constitution as not doing that. Now, you can join a CRA that provides for whatever, but you cannot, but not within this Constitution. Again, a little bit of a rabbit trail. I want to try to go back to staying on police here and the respecting cops being respected more. The judicial authority sector's rating system with a 30% vote may set or increase civil liberty rating floors. So you don't need a high majority of the population to say you need to increase rating floors on civil liberties, which means you cannot violate these civil liberties. Okay, so civil liberties are extremely important within my Constitution. Okay, but it has to be per narrowly drawn category. You cannot just do a big broad brush on a civil liberties. I want a whole, instead of having, let's say 12 civil liberties, I want 100 civil liberties, each one pinpointed and narrowly drawn, so we can have a better idea of what we're talking about and get the right rating floors per civil liberty, per more narrowly drawn civil liberty. A 75% vote lowers civil liberty rating floors, so it takes a lot to lower it back down because we really, really want to respect civil liberties. Every rating system in the violent crime mitigation system with a 30% vote may set rating floors to protect civil liberties per narrowly drawn category. A 75% vote lowers civil liberty rating systems. So it's important to note, within the violent crime mitigation system, we need to respect the freedom of the privacy of people's right to have right in their own papers, in their own belongings, in their own house, in their own cars, and the like. All that's going to be taken care of. All that is within the rating system to do that. It's not coming from judges. It's not coming from the Supreme Court. It's coming from rating systems, because these rating systems are representative bodies of the people. and every person's selection of a rating agency will change a proportional which rating agency has more power. So if you don't like the way one rating agency is given power, you change it to one that you agree with most. So it's highly important that you select wisely because your rating agency will protect your interest. Maybe not all the time to the way you like it because you are in a society with others. So there's a lot to get into. When there is an arrest for a violent crime, because this is going to be a long clause, it's going to go over about, I think, 3 different slides, so I have a lot of semicolons here. But what we're trying to do here is we're going to have a process when somebody gets arrested all the way through trial. So let's go, and this is going to be a separate process from the trial, and this is because there's free enterprise courts. And this is going to be at the monopolized sector board level to oversee and have eyes on everything going on. So when there is an arrest for a violent crime, the following must occur at the sector board level. Every violent crime CRA must proportionally staff a continuous, never-ending grand jury that will evaluate the evidence of every arrest within 6 hours of the arrest, and daily while a suspect is in custody. So we need to have very quick action so the police can not just arrest somebody, keep them in jail for a long period of time. Now, if they have to sleep off their drug-induced whatever, or they're drunk, this grand jury will have to still be there within 6 hours and say, hey, look, it looks like he's drunk or he's not conscious yet. He has issues. We'll come back in another 12 hours and but they at least saw him. And if that guy needs to or is able to address them, they can. So somebody always has the ability, and on a daily basis afterwards on a daily basis, they have the ability to talk to people who are at the sector board monopolized level and plead their case. Hey, I'm here. They don't have the evidence against me. Please make them show you the evidence. And these sector board people say, you have to show me the evidence or this guy gets to walk. So they have to show their work. The police officers have to show their work. They cannot just keep somebody, pick them up on Friday night, and hey, you'll see the judge on Monday. No, that doesn't work. Within 6 hours, you have evidence to suggest that you should have picked him up. And the police officers have to produce that evidence. And there's a whole system for this. Semicolon. The person arrested has the right to address the grand jury every evaluation, so daily. A 50% proportional vote of the grand jury is required to keep the suspect in custody. So it's highly important. They have to show that that person should be kept in custody. And they get to address them. They get to talk to them. The grand jury may place conditions. Let's see. The grand jury may place conditions on the release, such as bail, monitoring, among other relevant tools. So no longer a judge can do this. Now, a judge can oversee this, but this grand jury, a trained grand jury. We're not talking about just regular citizens coming in for the day. We're talking about an ongoing people who are trained, most likely people in their 60s and 70s, maybe retired. I don't know who been in the law enforcement industry a lot, been prosecutors and defense attorneys for a lifetime, but been there, maybe been in the prison industry as prison guards. They know the area. They know their territory. They've had experience, is what I'm trying to talk to you about. So that's who hopefully people will hire for the grand jury. The grand jury may place conditions on the release such as bail, monitoring, among other relevant tools. The grand jury can require services from the prison and correction sector, private sector prison and parole sector, all these things. But they can request those services, and they have to utilize services. So the prisons have to be utilized. They have to give that service, prison services, parole services, and the like. And people already are in agreement or already a member of a prison CRA. So they can take them into custody or monitor them through monitoring, paroles, and the like. A defendant's judicial authority CRA must supply a lawyer to the defendant in a violent crime cases. That's kind of already another clause, but I wanted to include that in this long clause. So, a defendant gets a lawyer. Semicolon. The law enforcement officers, the prosecutors, and the victim CRA, violent crime CRA, must submit all evidence to the grand jury. They can't keep anything back. There's a lot of rules right now where they have to give information, but it's not always the best. Prosecutors and police sometimes keep things back. They're not going to be able to. Or they get in trouble and their authority to be a judge, a prosecutor, and the like can be pulled by a representative body. That's a law enforcement authorization. The defendant's lawyer and the court. So this information has to be going to all these places. To the court, to the defendant, to the prosecutors. I mean, there'll be regulations on who it has to go to, but it has to go to all the different sides. And the judge and there's a judge from the sector board to oversee the process. And that judge ultimately has a lot of power to make sure. But even if that judge does wrong, you have an RA and a CRA that can come in and say, Judge, you're doing wrong. You have a law enforcement authorization rating agency and law enforcement authorization CRA to say, look, you did wrong. You have people that represent you always to push back on your behalf. Your lawyer can do it, yes, but you also have representative bodies that you're a member of that can push back on, hey, this is not legit. This sector board judge and a 60% of the grand jury is needed to affirm an indictment. So indictment has a process. The judicial sector's legislative branch must set up a system consistent with these principles and respect for civil liberties rating floors. So this is the system, but this is more of a constitutional language. So I always like to have a judicial sector board's legislative branch, a certain representative body, and I have a lot of representative bodies, and a certain representative body to set up a system for this, but consistent with the constitutional language here. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in the criminal justice system. I don't know everything, and I'm sure another clause or two or an adjustment on one of these clauses could be legit. So I'm open to suggestions on some of this, but this is the going idea right now. And they also always have to respect civil liberty rating floors. Now, if the crime rate gets out of hand because this is too strong of civil liberty protections, and we are letting go murderers and rapists to murder and rape again, well, the civil liberties of the new people getting raped and killed, their rights are being violated as well. So we need to make sure we're not giving so higher protections that we're just letting everybody go, because if too many rapists or murderers get let go, people are going to take matters into their own hands and not call the police, but just shoot the rapist, shoot the murderer, and we go down the wrong pathway. So we need to have a proper balance. Okay, that's it for that one clause. It's a longer clause, but the actual trial is separate from that process there. So the victims' judicial branch will have the court, and the victims' violent crime CRA provides prosecutor for that case, and the defendant's judicial branch provides the public defender or the judge, or the lawyer for the defendant. Now, obviously, you're allowed to hire your own, and that most likely will be included in whatever violent crime or judicial CRA that you select, and all that. That's going to be part of those agreements. The purpose of the VC, violent crime, is to define violent crime and the range of punishments for each type of violent crime. So it's a representative body. There is only one set of violent crime laws that are derived from the sector board. You can have different insurance regulations where people want to do business under this insurance CRA or another insurance CRA. That's fine. You can have different family law regulations where you choose which family law set of regulations you want. There can be different land and water or different road regulations that you can have. There's no problems with some of those. Some of the road regulations will have to be monopolized, don't get me wrong. But a lot of education and a lot of other sectors, you can have CRAs. You can have different regulations because they're regulating only their membership. But violent crime is not something that you go to have done. It's not a mutual agreement. Somebody injured you without your agreement. Somebody raped, stabbed, murdered, and your family takes care of it or whatever. So there's a lot involved in that, but the violent crime laws have to be the same. Violent crime is a credible threat or actual bodily harm. All other crimes are defined by CRAs in all other sectors. So I was just getting to that. I was talked about that. The violent crime infringes on individual fundamental rights to be secure in their persons. Thus, the VC sector board's legislative branch is not subject to the 70% supermajority. Laws are set with a 50% representative vote. The judicial branch of the victim Sector 11 CRA must hold a criminal trial for the violent crime. So I'm just going through some of the clauses of things I already talked about. The executive branch of the victim's Sector 11 CRA must supply the prosecutor. The VC rating system must set rating floors per narrowly drawn violent crime rate category. New idea here. The crime rate for murders have to be, the rating floor or the rating system sets a rating floor for violent crimes on murder, on rape, on stabbings, on carjackings, and the like. All the different categories. If it gets above that level, if the crime rate gets above that level, the punishments need to become harder, more severe. The law enforcement needs to be bulked up and more funding and more law enforcement needs to happen. The laws going through the courts, we need to stop. So ideas and standards need to improve and it needs to keep on improving until the rating floors per violent crime category is met and you get below that. So if the crime rate is too high, standards need to improve. The courts need better funding, more investigation. The law enforcement needs better investigation. We need to get the crime rate down. So the rating floors in this rating system has the ability to mandate better standards. The VC sector board must set a bar regarding the severity of the crime for death penalty. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what we're getting here is that death penalty cases need to have a stronger level of evidence, and then to do it, and a stronger or a level of severity of the crime to warrant a death penalty. But if the evidence is there, that is so overwhelming evidence, you got video, you got so many eyewitnesses, you caught somebody in the act, or whatever the case may be, then that person needs to be put to death within really 2 months. You need to go to trial within 30 days, 30-day trial, 40 days, within 40 days put to death. So 3 months later, that person really needs to be put to death if the evidence is strong enough, the case is severe enough, and anyway, that's that. The purpose of the law enforcement sector is to regulate law enforcement and first responders. So it's more than just law enforcement. You get to pick what CRA is doing the best, or what private business is doing the best. Every entity must purchase law enforcement from a regulated law enforcement business. Highly important to understand that you are picking your law enforcement. You're going to have a lot more respect from law enforcement if you get to pick which one you want. There's 12 to choose from. And then when you get in there, you get to vote within the members of your law enforcement CRA for leaders of your law enforcement, for your separate police chief, for your separate police officers, and that's going to protect you, even from the other cops if need be. Hopefully that's not going to be the case. There's going to be a lot of regulations where cops have to respect each other, have a lot of cooperations, but ultimately stand between you and whoever's trying to hurt you. The law enforcement sector's rating system must set a rating floor sufficient for proper funding and proper law enforcement levels. So we cannot go cheap on this. If you go too cheap and the crime rate starts to go up, the mandate is more funding, more cops, better courts, keep people in prison longer. There's a system for everything. A lot of accountability. And just to make sure everybody understands, everybody's going to have to pay some. There's 25% of the law enforcement has to be paid by head tax. 25% has to be paid by real estate tax. So the people living in $1 million houses have to pay 10 times more than somebody living in a house at $100,000. And just because you rent, every unit that you rent has a real estate value, and you're going to be paying your real estate tax. So the apartment complex or whoever you're renting from doesn't get to pick your law enforcement agency for you. It's the renter that does it. And the renter has a specific, they pay the real estate tax. So they pay this. Then some comes from, 50% comes from businesses, because businesses need to be protected as well. So when a business pays for their own law enforcement and they need services, when a crime happens and they call and they don't get good service, they're going to choose somebody else. And one police business is going to lose funding and business, and another one's going to pick it up. Obviously, you're going to see how that is going to stop the bad people from even being in business, because they're not going to have enough customers. Okay, did I finish this? Yes. Sector 12 CRA may charge more than the rating floor level of the law enforcement. So these are the bottom level funding that you can do. Obviously, some people want more protection. They want bodyguards. If you have death threats on you, or you're a rich person who is in the public eye, you can hire more. But we don't want everybody to have a bodyguard, because that's just so expensive. And you just get to such a degree that nobody can afford it, or the poor cannot afford that much. But you don't stop the rich from having that, because even if the rich have that, and that person and that law enforcement bodyguard has a badge, they have to protect everybody within regulations, within immediate danger, until that other till your law enforcement company comes in and takes over. If the rating floor on a crime rate set by the VC sector is exceeded, funding contracts to fund law enforcement businesses must increase. Talked about that already, but here's the clause. The law enforcement sector's rating system must set a rating floor sufficient for cooperation to attain joint patrols and joint higher level law enforcement organizations. So you have to understand, we will still have patrols that protect everybody within immediate danger. So if a 911 call comes in, they go to anybody's house that called 911, not just their clients. Now, immediately, whoever law enforcement business you have, they'll start taking over after that. At that point, their detectives, their sergeants, their people will start coming over and collecting the evidence and trying to solve the problem, solve the crime. Law enforcement sector boards must establish regulations regarding authorized police protection, protecting everyone regardless of membership. Just talked about that, but that's the clause. Every law enforcement officer and law enforcement business must protect everyone regardless of membership within the mandated regulations. Just talked about that, but it's important to understand there is a clause for the things I'm saying. Law enforcement sector boards must set conditions in which and to what extent the law enforcement sector board's elected leaders, so the monopolized sector board will have an executive leader, the police chief, the sheriff, but but they're not going to have much power on a daily basis. Only when big things happen, a big riot or a natural disaster or whatever the big thing happens where you need to have major coordination. Now, there's going to be normal coordination going on at all times. Cooperation, rating floors and cooperations, and just the desire for better service and productivity to have cooperation. So all the CRAs will be doing cooperation in the beginning, but when a big thing happens, we can have the police chief mandate all the police officers do what he tells them to do. But that has to be within regulations. It has to be understood by all the different local CRA police chiefs. So within a city, there'll be roughly 12 different police chiefs of each CRA, and then one police chief overall, and each one having their power. Obviously, they protect their people that they're supposed to, but also everybody within immediate danger. Okay, but anyway, cooperation is going to have rating floors, so that is going to happen. Even higher level crime labs and state boards of investigations and like FBI type of people, high level people. Some of that's just going to be joint cooperation, and some of that will be at the sector board level. How much of each? I'm not sure exactly how much of each. Which one's more productive? I want to try to keep as much at the CRA level as possible with cooperation versus at the sector board level. Just because you have better, you man it better that way. The purpose of the law enforcement authorization sector is to authorize and remove authorization for everyone with inherent government power, governmental authority within the law enforcement violent crime mitigation system within these 5 sectors we were just talking about. Now, this is going to create a much better respect for law enforcement because all you need is 40%, representatives of 40% of the people to totally take away somebody's badge. So nobody wants their badge taken away. So they need to keep within norms. They cannot be a thug. And if you are known to be a thug, if you get captured on a camera being a thug, you're doing things in a thuggish manner, they're going to take your badge away. Right now, government monopolized governance. They don't take people's badge away. The union rules and everything else is stopping that from happening as much as it should. So sometimes it happens, but a lot of times it doesn't. So you have to understand, we have a separate representative body that can pull a badge. And that is not based off of business decisions and the like. That's based off that person's being a thug. And we tried to reform him some. We tried to retrain him. But he ended up, he continues to be a thug. Okay. The LEA Sector Board must ensure law enforcement officers respect the people's civil liberties to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, records, documents, effects, along with all civil liberties as defined by rating floors. So every current civil liberties there is must, and there's language within the Constitution saying must be given a rating floor per narrowly drawn category. But this is list some of the normal ones that we currently have right now, being secure in the papers, houses, papers. And when somebody says houses, that means anything that person owns, their car, their business, whatever. We don't want any of these little loopholes. So rating floors really can define things. Civil liberties are not just what the Supreme Court says or is said within the Constitution. Rating floors can set civil liberties because it's harming people. Outside of transactions, it's significant negative externalities. And there's 2 different types of civil liberties. One, you cannot violate somebody's free speech and the freedom of press and the freedom of association, that type. But another one is what the police officers can do to you or not do to you, what they have to respect when you're going through the criminal justice system. And this is more of the criminal justice system here. But both are important. But you have to understand there's 2 sides to that. The LEA sector authorizes with a 70% vote and repeals authorization with a 40% vote. Highly important to understand that. The LEA executive leader has the authority to direct all law enforcement regarding the enforcement of and non-acceptance of the repeal of the law enforcement authority. So if the LEA, the Law Enforcement Authorization Agency, takes somebody's badge, but somebody says, I'm going to keep my badge, I'm going to keep my gun, I'm going to go out there in uniform, I'm going to go out there in my cop car, and I'm still going to make an arrest and do what I do. No, your badge was pulled. The police chief of the LEA can direct any law enforcement officer by law, by constitutional law. You have to obey this guy if the regulations are within the regulations. They have to obey this guy, again, within the regulations, to apprehend any person who is not giving up their power. So you cannot have just a free enterprise police and say that it's a free-for-all, anybody gets to be a police. No, definitely no. The CRAs within the LEA sector is responsible for law enforcement academies. So each LEA is responsible for their academies. That's going to really help stop. There's a lot of problems right now with the expense of starting a new police officer or firefighter. It's very expensive to train somebody up. Then they hire them, and then 6 months later they go get taken by another jurisdiction, and they're already trained up. They already went through the police academy. They already went through the fireman academy, and now you just lost that 6 months worth of training that you paid for. Well, the LEA's doing this proportional to their membership is going to be highly important because they don't care where they went. That cost of training is a separate cost funded by LEAs. And they do that proportional to their membership. But that also gives them a way to train them in the correct ways. So there's a lot to that, but that also stops heavy contracts to keep a police officer for 10 years or whatever, 5 years contracts, because the upfront cost of training was so high. And starting at the age of 13, yeah, we want these people to go into, we want the LEAs to start in middle school to high school teaching people some basics around law enforcement. So they have a very narrowly focused mission in middle school to high school about how to deal with the police officers, maybe a little bit of how to be a assistant guard, assistant whatever, teaching them some basics about the law enforcement, what to do, what not to do, how to stay out of trouble, but also how to, whether to be, getting some basic training on how to be a police officer or the like. A 70% vote of the Sector 13 Sector Board is required to restrict weapons based on negative externalities. This is my Second Amendment. I have like 2 or 3 clauses dealing with Second Amendment type issues, but I'm very, very strong on this. And it takes a 70% vote to restrict weapons based off negative externalities. So it's a very, very strong Second Amendment, and there's a lot to that, and you're just going to have to read through that if you want to, but people holding weapons is a good way to have a better society, and especially when they're trained in doing that. So you give these people a level 2 or 3 badge out of 10, and without any training, let's say you have a 10, you get it up to a 20 or a 30. Definitely not a cop, which would be like a 50. I don't know. I just did my numbers wrong. 0 through 100 scale, everybody's going to probably start off with a 10. Cops are going to be at a 50. Master detectives at a 60. FBI at 100 type of thing. But the level 10 to 20, you might have to take a class to get to a 20. You can't do much with it, but you're able to do a little bit more. You're trained with a weapon. You know some scenario training. You're going to be assistant to a cop if necessary. If you're, let's say you're a 30 or a 40, you can show your badge to a cop in a big situation, and they can order you around in a manner because you've been trained and certified in certain things. Anyway, let's continue going. The Judicial Authority Sector Board must create a system of judicial warrants that respect civil liberties properly pass the civil liberty rating floors. Again, I'll do a full thing on civil liberties. You got a lot of it here, but there's going to be a lot more. I just want to concentrate strictly on civil liberties and how important it is to me and within this Constitution. There's a lot of language in the Constitution regarding that. Not too much in our current Constitution. You have small clauses that has to be interpreted in major ways and legislated through in significant ways. This really narrows things down. It allows representative bodies versus Supreme Courts in the court system to make the laws. And representative bodies are always better to make laws than the court system. And I know people like, no, the judicial branch does not make laws right now. Yes, they do. Very significantly, they do. So I know they're called the judicial branch, and the legislative branch makes laws. Well, that's not the way it works anymore in real terms. The executive makes way too many laws. The court system makes way too many laws. The legislative branch has turned over way too much of their power to make laws to the other two branches. Now, most of my laws are going to come from competitive regulatory agencies and people specialize in their sector. Because people who really know prisons, that's good for them to make laws around prisons. And they should be making environmental laws. People who really know how to be a diplomat, we want their full-time devoted for that and not messed with, let's say, education law or family law. We want different people selected for each one, and then CRAs doing it in a free enterprise type of way, doing it in an experimental type of way, and see which way works better. Big rabbit trail, but let's keep on going. The judicial branch of the victim's relevant sector, CRA, must hold the trial for dispute. The Judicial Authority Sector Board Executive Branch establishes the top appellate court. So we have two levels of appellate courts. The Judicial Authority's rating system will have an appellate court strictly dealing with corruption. So that's a big issue with cops as well. Or at least it's been claimed to be. How big it is, what the statistics are, it's hard to know because of record keeping and the like. But we will have a court dealing specifically with corruption, local level, federal level, and state level. All three levels of government, we have a representative body, the judicial sector, and the rating system. They will be dealing with corruption, abuse, self-dealings, and the like. The purpose of the prison and correction sector is to provide prisons and corrections to people lawfully convicted of crimes and sentenced. Now, let me see if I put this here. Okay. Let's see. I'm just going to go to this one. I'm getting way too long. The Sector 15, the Prison Sector Board, must use the Sector 15 rating system as a significant factor in funding prisons and corrections with the goal of improving ratings. So even though these private prisons, we're going to have a funding mechanism that is based off of long-term results and how good the results of the prison is. So they're going to use ratings to do that. And some of the things that they're going to be looking at is, are you restoring the victim of your crime to make them whole? Are you getting yourself educated enough to have a good job when you get out? What's the long-term prospering of the convicted felon? What is the civil liberties within the prison? Is people getting beat up? Can you keep drugs out of the prison? Are you improving the life of the person who was convicted? Are you getting long-term good results from the prisoners? A lot of people, they just want to focus on the victim got hurt, so we punish the perpetrator. That's great and everything, but if that's all you look at, when that person gets out of jail, they're not in the best position. They're not as educated. They don't have the work skills. They can't get a job for multiple reasons. And they don't have a good, thriving life. And they go back to a life of crime to a large degree. Prisons and paroles and corrections are going, and having multiple ways of doing it, are going to have a lot of experimentations on how to do that best. And the better results, based off rating system and the rating scores, are going to come with more money. So somebody who just wants to say, I'm in for the dollars and just house these people in a bad way and not do anything, well, the dollars aren't going to flow to them. Plus, nobody wants to belong to their prison CRA. People want to belong to a prison CRA that has good results. And there will be a lot of good effects to a good incentive program within the prisons. Right now, we don't have a good incentive program within the prisons. Okay, your Sector 15 rating agency matters. So what rating agency you pick, so your CRA you pick and your rating agency you pick, you select it. That selection is a lot better than an election. You select it and then you have your elections within your selection. It's highly important to understand. You look at the results. And anyway, you look at the results and you pick the right rating agencies and the right CRAs. Ratings must include, in large part, restoration. Oh, I was just getting to this. I wish I saw this one a minute ago. Restoration, compensation, restoration, compensation, reparations to the victim of crimes, as well as the low recidivism rates and personal long-term prospering of the people convicted. This is constitutional language. So based off of these things are going to flow a lot of money to house and what prisons receive the inmates. There's a lot of ways to show accountability. Every prisoner is still going to have an identity CRA that's going to look after them, a family CRA to look after them. There's going to be a lot of CRAs and RAs. A prisoner is still going to be a member of a CRA and RA in all the 30 sectors. Those people are going to look after, those representative agencies are going to look after every prisoner, their members, to make sure they're not just forgotten in the system. Okay, here's the 30 sectors again. To see the whole 30 sectors, here are, 15 of it. Here's you can see it a little bit better on the screen. Here are the 5 that deal with the law enforcement, the prisons and the like, dealing with violent crime mitigation. Why you're not going to respect a police officer. So you see that we have a lot better accountability within the system than the current system. With that accountability, with the selection that you get to pick your police officer, moving taxes from a monopolized, they take your tax money, then politicians choose how to spend it, to you choosing how you're going to spend it by your selection of a police business. What police contract you want to buy. What police contract a business wants to buy. And then those police businesses competing with other police businesses for your service, for your business of the service of police services. So it's highly important to understand that free enterprise system, not 100% free enterprise, but right now it's total socialism. Major free enterprise benefits coming into this. Anyway, here's 15 more sectors and how it might relate to the overall structure. And each one of these can be, each one of these will need police. So CRAs are going to be hiring police. There's a lot of places police are going to get their money. Law enforcement contracts are going to bulk up the police to what they are now. And maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. We don't know until we go to a free enterprise system. The role of prices are going to be, the role of prices and the rating system is going to give the needed information to get the right level of police, the right funding for police, the right police contracts and the wages of police, and the number, or whether we should do another crime lab, whether we should do more high level police, whether we should do a whole bunch of part-time police. What's needed, experimentation and the like will get you there. This is a screen, I always like to end on this screen. You pick the law enforcement agency that you want. These people will give you high quality information and be your representative to give feedback as a representative body to look at something, and if somebody's doing wrong, they can rate them low, and rating somebody low is going to take away somebody's, people are going to make decisions on what police business they want to use by rating levels. So if a rating agency rates somebody low, they need to justify it, and that's going to harm them. You can't do it illegitimately, but you understand where we can get a better system. Okay, way too long of a video. I'm sorry for an hour and 20 minutes, but I had a lot to say around law enforcement and how we get a better respect, how we get better law enforcement. Right now, socialism is not the best way to get law enforcement. Free enterprise, again, not all free enterprise. You can't be 100% free enterprise. You never get 100% free enterprise on anything. Most things you can get really close to, and going from total socialism, free enterprise, and yes, we do have some private police now, but don't get me wrong, it's significantly significantly socialism now, and I'm going significantly towards free enterprise, obviously with major accountability in there, because we have to live in society, and you can't have negative externalities and corrupt cops, thugs as cops. Those are negative externalities. Anyway, please consider a donation to Haley 2024, The Movement. I have a link on my website, and I just need a social media person. I would love to do this full time, replace at least part of my income, and start doing this full time. And until the next video.